Hi guys, welcome to 3 Rounds a Minute. My name is Pingu. Today we are going back to Warpath. Specifically, we're going to talk about the GCPS, which are these guys on the top right here. They are the sort of Imperial Guard equivalent of the Warpath universe. For those of you who don't know, Epic Warpath is an epic scale, so roughly 10 to 12 millimeters. Epic war game in the same vein as something like Legions Imperialis, if you've heard about that, or Epic. Or like the Drop Zone Commander games. The idea is it's large scale combat, slightly simpler rule sets to allow you to control like massive armies all at once. So last episode we went through the Enforcers. That was a little while ago, but it's been Christmas, so kind of give me a break. Anyway, so we're going to be talking about the GCPS, which, like I said, are kind of your Imperial Guard, or the better way to think of them, I think, is the mobile infantry from Starship Troopers. They're very much like large chunks of infantry, some tanks, and you're trying to like overwhelm your opponent. I will have a list to go through at the end of all this. Unlike the Enforcers one where I built it in real time, the GCPS really benefits from a bit more sitting and fiddling. You've got a lot more playing around with the rules. So I've pre-written a list and we'll go through that at the end. But for now, what I want to do is we can go into the GCPS on the list builder, and we'll go through each of the different units, and then at the end of it we'll go through the list that I've built and talk about why I've selected those units and what I'm planning to do with the army, the overall plan I have for my GCPS list. And I will be playing them this week, so we'll get to see whether or not my plan works or not. Alright, and here we are inside the list builder. So in the Enforcers video I did the other week, I went through list building and how list building works overall. I won't do that on this one. I'll probably put out a short that's a generic one that covers kind of list building as its own concept, so that we don't have to go through it at the beginning of every one of these videos. The long and short of it is you must have an HQ for a company, you must have at least 2 troops in that company, and those troops then unlock the rest of it. So you must have at least 1 troop to be able to unlock a specialist, so you need to have 2 troops to have 2 specialists, 3 troops to have 3 specialists, and so on and so forth. You must have at least 2 troops and or specialists to buy in 1 support. So you could have 1 troop and 1 specialist and get 1 support, or you could have 2 troops to buy 1 support, or ultimately you can get up to 4, so you could have 4 troops, 4 specialists, and then 4 supports. But points wise I think that's unlikely, but maybe. Anyway, that's the general gist of list building. Let's go through all the different units and we can discuss the pros and cons of the GCPS, how the list building works for them, and then we'll put together a list. So let's start with the HQs, same as before. HQs, as I said in the Enforcers list, your HQs really are there to provide you with your command radius and your tactician dice. Every game you get 3 black tactician or 3 black command point dice all the time, even if you don't have any command left. You get those 3 to be able to roll for things like rerolls and orders. And your HQs that you're buying here, what you really are paying for is these tactician dice. And as much as like other things are useful, what you really care about is this. It's not universally true, but generally that's kind of the rubric you want to go by. If you're paying a lot of points and you don't get a significant uplift in these dice, it's probably not really worth it unless it's a really big super heavy and it's got something else it's bringing to the table. But for now, I'd say start with whether or not it's bringing those dice to you, and if it's not, consider not bringing it. So in this case, he's 35 points. He's probably about as cheap as anything you're going to find in this game, which makes him not terrible, right? 35 points for a single black die. I don't hate it. Stealthy seems weird considering he's protected by the HQ rules anyway. So your HQs can't be targeted unless the closest viable target. So it doesn't really help him that they can't shoot him, because they can't shoot him anyway. Command radius 12 inches, that's completely normal. He's got the laser rifle, which means he can benefit from the laser rifle order, but again, as I say with most of the HQs, if your HQ is in a position where he's actively rolling dice to save his life, something else has gone horribly wrong and you're in trouble. Don't rely on this guy doing anything good with his gun. Like you want him for your dice. That's about it. So at 35 points, not a terrible investment. It gets you an extra dice, and it might give you what you need to unlock a company and get a load more stuff. So I definitely wouldn't say never take him. The issue is that you obviously have better HQ choices at not an awful lot more of an outlay. So if we go down to the major, this guy's great. 50 points is difficult to argue with. He doesn't have a bigger command radius. Some of the more expensive HQs do. Just a normal 12-inch command radius. He has cunning, which is a big deal. Cunning allows you to change an order after you reveal. So at the phase where you reveal all your orders, you can use cunning to change one of them from whatever it is into a different one. The reason that's important is because if you have a pinned units can only be given an advance order. If you want to give them an Overwatch token, say they're going to get charged, or if you want to shoot first, right, give them an Overwatch token, the way to do that is to have your HQ within, in this case, 12 inches of them, and then he can use his cunning ability to flip that to an Overwatch or a sprint token, right? So they could charge. So very useful skill. You can only do it once per, like, or it'll say, but generally once per cunning person. Very useful thing. Always bring one. they're super useful. And this guy gets 1 black and 1 orange dice. So the black dice are a bit there. The orange dice is pretty good. The list that I've written, I'll bring up a little later, has 2 of these guys in, so that you get 2 extra black and 2 extra orange dice, which is really nice. Like, you're going to get a decent number of orders out of that. And as well, the GCPS have one of the abilities, one of their special orders. You can basically spend command tokens to up your control of an objective you have units on. So if you're contesting an objective, you can spend command tokens to take control of it away from your opponent. Very useful skill. So lots of command dice for these guys is really a big deal. Again, I didn't mention it before, but they get the basic transport option. 20 points for transport isn't terrible, and kind of that's a kind of rounding error in this game. So there's a very real chance you come to a place where you're like, you know what, I'll buy, a battlefield stratagem for some points, and then the 20 points that are left over, I'll give one of my HQs a mule. Again, it's a bit of an odd choice. They don't need it. They move pretty quick anyway because they always have a sprint token. And you generally want them to be hidden behind other units. So like charging them around really isn't a plan. But yeah, the major is, for 50 points, he's really good. The command vehicle, I don't love this. I don't hate it. It's a bit of a weird one. Again, it doesn't have enough dice for this to really matter. The real benefit you have from this guy is a bit more survivable. But again, if your HQs are getting shot at, you already have bigger problems. The 16-inch command radius is nice, but the thing with just the 1 green dice is that you're going to get more command tokens from this almost all of the time. So, I mean, there's nothing to say you shouldn't go 1 of each. I think at this point, the way I'm playing it, I think, and this is in the list I'm writing, I've got, that we will look at later even, I've got 2 of these guys, and I think that works pretty well. Yeah, that's your HQ choices. They're not bad, in all honesty. None of them I look at and I think I would never take this as terrible. I think these are all pretty okay, and I think you could probably make a good argument for any of them, up to and including this guy. So I think they're well worth it. It just depends on the list you're writing. And the GCPS have like a really cool selection of of archetypes you can build, because you've got such a varied list of choices. So here we go, we've got the troop choices here. So we'll look at the Marines first. The Marines are absolutely zero frills, right? They can take advantage of the laser rifle order, so you can spend a command token on them, and if they have an Overwatch token, they can shoot at half range, which is real close, but they get to double the number of dice. So you basically turn this into like a rapid firing laser rifle, which really the point of it is that they get to mince things up if they charge into them. So Marines are objective holders supreme. They're cheap as hell, and they're unlocking, right? There's nothing to cry about here. They're cheap enough, and they do a fine job. They're not nothing to write home about. Like you're not gonna hit an awful lot of the time, but that's not what you're really bringing them for. You're bringing them to unlock your better units, and you're bringing them to hold objectives and get in the way. And also, a super important part of the GCPS, or at least one of the archetypes you can build in the GCPS, is activation control. You can out-activate almost anyone, and that's a really powerful metric. You've got some very fragile units in here that need the advantage of moving second to really take advantage of them. And your Marines being so cheap and unlocking so many things means that if you can get up to those higher numbers of activations, what you can do is you can force your opponent to, even if they don't want to activate a powerful unit, force them to move that unit before you have to move your big heavy hitters, and then you can pick your angle of attack. And Marines are great for adding activations to your list. So cheap, not great, but they do a very important job within the GCPS. Veteran motorcycles. This is super cool. The fact that these guys are troops is so cool. You can build like a very, very fast sort of QRF type army with these guys. And the fast units in this game are super important. Like it's an objective-based game, and you generally start your first turn or so quite far away from a lot of objectives. These guys are brilliant at like just charging out and snatching an objective, and they're relatively cheap for what they do. Like a lot of the other fast units are closer to 200 points. They don't have any frills, very similar to the Marines. Like they're not going to do an awful lot of damage, but you can just bring a ton of them because you're not paying a premium for them. They're a troops choice, so you can just use them to unlock instead of the Marines, right? It's only 30 more points, and they go a hell of a lot quicker, right? They got the same guns, and they shoot as well, right? They shoot better. Like, these guys are great. So yeah, I definitely bring these guys if you can. I absolutely love the fast units in this game, and these guys are one of the best in their type. I think the Enforcer jet bikes are better, but they're also way more expensive than specialists, and you have other things competing for that specialist role, which you don't really necessarily in GCPS. So let's move on. Let's have a look at the Rangers. The Rangers are fine. They're kind of like worse Enforcer Pathfinders. Very short range weapons, and this is kind of a theme here. There's a lot of very short range guns in this list, and that is what I mean by it kind of requires activation control. You need your opponent to commit to their move before you are forced to move your units out to shoot at them, because you need to make sure you can get into range. Yeah, laser carbines, short range, 2 dice, which is nice. Again, they don't shoot particularly well. They shoot better than the basic Marines, but you know, that's nothing to write home about. Anti-grav, so at least they can move relatively unhindered across terrain, and stealthy is really nice. But you're paying like quite a lot for them. 145 points. They're cool. I think that generally speaking, I probably would take the veteran motorcycles over the bikers. Although Rangers are better for holding objectives, you can put them in buildings and kind of like hole up. But I think if I was going for objective holders, I'd probably go for Marines. The Rangers are in just a bit of a weird place, I think. Although the stealthy in a building does make them pretty tough. But who knows? I think at the moment I'm leaning more towards activation control, so I tend to lean towards the cheaper troops. But you know, they're not terrible. They're absolutely fine. They just won't do an awful lot of damage. So you know, be warned. If you run these guys out expecting them to do a lot of damage, they're not going to. 6-inch range, 2 dice. Like you're going to get 1 round of shooting off before you get charged. And they're not great in assault, right? So they're going to get chewed to pieces because most people aren't going to waste time trying to shoot them. They're stealthy. You probably got in a building like. I think if you come up against an army that has at least some melee capability, they're probably just going to charge them and rip them to pieces. Yeah, 145 points, they're a bit much. The veterans, cheaper, importantly, longer range, less dice. Again, they're not going to do that much shooting damage, right? Even against lightly armored infantry. These guys are really for holding objectives, and if you're going to pay... Like, if you have the extra points at 135, I think... without the special ability, so they're no stealthy, but fine. But the ability to then use Move It Soldier if you have the orders left over, I think that's enough of a benefit that if I have the points left over, I'd spend them on veterans, rather than trying to find an extra 10 points to spend on Rangers. But that's just me. And maybe they're amazing and I'm just not seeing it. But I think I'd rather have the longer range in 1 dice. You're going to get more rounds of shooting off, that's a promise. Because a lot of people will find cover and then hold up in it, and if that's 9 inches away, your Rangers aren't doing a damn thing, whereas the veterans are at least going to be able to take shots at them, and that will happen more regularly than you realise. and also, you know, these guys can benefit from the rapid fire rule as well, so, you know, even if they are within 6 inches, these guys might get 2 dice, but you also do as well if you spend a command token, so... I think the veterans are probably better than the Rangers, but the Marines are probably where it's really at. The vast majority of your army is filled out with Marines and a few veteran motorcycles, and I would be happy with that. You'll see later, I definitely am. So yeah, that's all your troop choices. None of them are terrible, in all honesty. I think it comes down to kind of the balance of what you're trying to achieve with your infantry. Generally speaking, my troops I'm bringing as unlocking units and as things to hold objectives rather than things to do an awful lot of damage, unless I'm using them defensively. The Pathfinders and Enforcers are a great example of that. They'll hold a point really well against almost anyone. So, onto the specialists. What have we got here? We have heavy weapons teams. Now, I hated these guys when I first saw them, and I bought a unit of them to a game, and I maligned them non-stop whilst playing this game. Because, on paper, their profile seems fine, right? They're 2d8 shots. You've got 3 of them, so you're getting 6 shots. AP2, that's pretty good. The 24-inch range is shorter than you think it is. And the speed that they move at is debilitating. So you're probably bringing these guys in some sort of transport, or you're expecting someone to come to you. Now, the reason I hated them and don't currently hate them is because I have had a bit of a revelation about how to use these guys. They are harassment weapons for the majority of the game. The real power that these guys are providing you that you're looking for is the anti-aircraft rule. Having 2 anti-aircraft platforms on your side of the table is vitally important for a lot of these games. I'm telling you now, if you come up against an Enforcer player, he's probably going to have the bomber, and that bomber is going to tear you to pieces unless you have a dedicated weapon that can stop it. And putting a unit of these guys on either flank of your army is going to basically just wipe out the option to come to your side of the table. They're not... The flyers are tough to hit because they have the fly rule, right? So they're hard to shoot at. The moment you strip away that defense, they become incredibly killable, and they're not going to want to try and take this fight. What people will probably try and do is try and take these out with their tanks, and then only then bring in their aircraft. But that's forcing your opponent to do something they don't want to do. That's kind of the essence of these games. So these heavy weapons teams, because of the price, I think probably if you're going to bring like 2 companies, bring 1 unit of these in each company, and for 95 points, they'll do a great job of stopping your opponent. And even if they don't have aircraft, you're still dealing with a 24-inch range 2-dice AP2 weapon. They are perfectly good for that points cost, and they'll do a brilliant job for you. So yeah, heavy weapons teams. Originally hated them, genuinely think they're pretty good. The Striders. If anyone's watched my Enforcer list, you'll know I really do like Striders. The GCPS Strider is slightly less good. It's not got a save, which is the big difference here. The weapons profiles are the same, but the save is a pretty big deal. They still have heavy armor, so they're still not going to get hurt by light infantry, but they're still like a relatively cheap unlocking specialist, and they do a fine job. They're not going to be like your premium tank hunter. They're not going to be charging across the battlefield, murdering tanks across the table. What they do effectively, and I said this with the Enforcers, is they deny area really well. They force your opponent to get nowhere near that 18-inch range. No one, even with Victors, right? And Victors are pretty tough tanks. They're not going to like move their Victors within 18 inches. They're going to try and stay outside of those 18 inches and take pot shots at you. Which, yeah, okay, you're going to absolutely murder those Striders at that range. The point is that I can force you to stay out of an area until you kill those Striders. So again, the GCPS are doing a great job of zoning out things from people. Either you hide your Striders behind a building, wait until they move their Victors closer, and then you have your 6-inch move out from behind the building to force them into range, and then you're shooting at their Victors. Victors don't like being shot at. They're tough, but they're still going to die. You're rolling 3 dice at them on AP2. That's pretty scary. Like, it's not going to win you the game, but people will avoid them if they can, and that's kind of what the Striders do. For 120 points and you're unlocking support units, I think they're pretty decent. The Ajax Strider. So, the problem this guy has is the AP is great, right? They are relatively tough. These guys have the save, right? So these are tougher than the regular one for 20 points. So that is worth something. The issue is the range is incredibly short, and they're not that fast, right? You can put these guys in buildings, which I think is mental, but you can put these guys in buildings, which makes them incredibly tough to kill. But 9-inch range just feels so painful for 140 points. Like I said, the real power of these guys is area denial. Like, you're not getting an awful lot of area denial at 9 inches. Like, you're talking about like the width of a lot of the buildings, right? It's maybe I'm wrong. Maybe these guys are absolutely brilliant. I think that there are better options at kind of 140 points, right? You can just save this stuff and pick up a cheaper heavy weapons team or a GCPS strider and save those extra 20 points. Or if you were going to buy 2 striders, right, 40 points. That's not nothing. Like that starts to impact some of these choices here, right? And the specialists are not really where you're doing your real killing. The specialists are enablers to your big support units. So I don't love the Ajax. I'd probably go GCPS strider and save some points. Next unit, right? Again, I'm going to say when I first looked at these guys, I thought they were terrible. For a similar reason to the Strider, right? The Strider, you've got short range. AP3 is amazing. You pay a massive premium for that AP3. Like, huge. Considering you've got 6-inch range, right? These guys are incredibly expensive. But they have stealthy, they have anti-grav. So they're fast and they're hard to hit. The way you use these guys is you take advantage of a couple of overlapping things. We haven't been through it yet, but you have these GCPS Hornets. They are flying transports, right? What you probably, this is how I'm going to use them, you know, your mileage may vary. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take these dudes, I'm going to throw them in a GCPS Hornet unit, and I'm going to pick a target. I'm going to decide on something that needs to be blown to pieces, probably around turn 2. And I go after that target like a bulldog, right? So you pick a point, and if you can, if this happens sort of turn 2, you bring your ranger unit in the Hornets. You wait for them to burn all of their activations for a turn, right? You spend all of your activations moving inconsequential units, move Marines, spend actions on Marines, get them to move everything they have first. Once they have had to commit their heavy armor, whatever it is that you need to kill, once they have committed that to a position, you then take the Rangers in the GCPS Hornet and you jump it towards them, right? If it's in range, you just go straight there, drop the Rangers out, move the Rangers forwards, and you shoot the living snot out of it, right? If you can do that, at the end of that order, so say, this is a bit odd because of the way that activations and turns work out, but let's say they've moved their heavy tank that you're particularly looking to take out the Rangers. You then immediately activate the Hornets for their move. You would have to have given them an advance for this to work, so you give them an advance, so you then move, what, 14 inches? Yeah, so you move 14 inches with your Hornets. You drop your Ranger tank hunters out. They go the 5 inches forward that they need. Now, provided you have planned for this, you should now be somewhere within 6 inches of your target. What you do is you then shoot all of these AP3 shots from your 6 dudes into their armor. Hopefully, you blow it to pieces, or at least do it some significant damage. You then spend a command token to move these guys their advance order, right? So you can move them 5 inches back into a building or into cover and hide them. These guys are like single-use missiles, right? You fling them out at the enemy, you shoot them, and then you run away, and you hope that you've done enough damage that whatever's coming back at you either doesn't kill the Rangers, or you've already blown up the unit you came to kill. You really lack for really high AP weapons in the GCPS list. These guys are your best bet, but you have to use them strategically. And the list gives you what you need to do it. It gives you the capacity to activate people, but you have to be conscious of it while you're doing it. And these guys are great for it. They're very expensive. Be very careful with them, but I think there's a real genuinely cool finesse move you can play with these guys. Tac drones. So tac drones are sort of the replacement for Ranger tank hunters if you don't trust them to do their job. is the simple explanation. Tac drones are great. 195 points though is the problem, right? 24-inch range, 2 dice pinning weapon, absolutely amazing. You're going to absolutely terrify infantry with this. The missile launchers, you've got 6 of them, right? So you're not rolling a particularly low number of dice. You're shooting 4s, right? These guys are going to hit. You keep these guys alive, they're going to do a lot of damage. They can't be pinned because of unflinching. These guys are pretty good. The issue is that almost every heavy unit you're going to come across is going to outrange you. Like if you're coming up against a unit you want to kill with the tac drones, if you're coming up against APCs, you don't really care. If you're coming up against Striders, you don't really care. You're going to outrange them, right? The things you need to be worried about are things like the Victors or some of the super heavies. They're the things you need to shoot with AP2, AP3, and 24 inches is going to be outranged by most of their guns. Unless you're up against Forge Fathers, in which case, who cares? Yeah, I like tac drones. I think they're very expensive for what they are. That said, I would probably bring a unit of these guys because they are your insurance. Like if your Ranger Tank Hunter move doesn't pan out, if they get first turn, or if they're shooting first, or if they've got a unit on Overwatch that can see these Rangers, you're going to get melted because you have to use an advance on the Rangers for them to get all the movement. So swings and roundabouts. I think bringing a tac drone unit isn't a mistake. They're just really expensive, and you can't really do much better than them without spending those points. So I'd probably bring one and only one, and just try to keep them safe until you've got a target for them, and then throw them up into a position to take a shot and hope that they don't get absolutely murdered with the return fire, because your opponent's going to see these and immediately want to wipe them out. They are scary enough to be a priority target. But yeah, that's all of the specialists. I actually really like the GCPS list in general. I think the Ajax might be a bit of a trap, but also, you know, he's not terrible, and you could use him as a big sort of distraction Carnifex, even if nothing else. So yeah, it's a much more usable list than say the Enforcers. There are a lot more good options than I think the Enforcers have. The Enforcers have some like objectively bad choices that you need to avoid. I think the GCPS is a bit more forgiving. On to the supports. So first one is the Hornets. We already talked about these guys. The transports, so that's what the capacity rule is. It basically says that each vehicle can take 3 stands. So any 6-stand unit can jump in these things as long as they are transportable. So like they can't transport vehicles or anything. They have a fly rule, which means you get -2 to hit them, which is quite nice. And hover deployment means that you can drop troops out of it whilst flying, which is cool. Same as any APC, basically. They have a harassment gun. You're not going to like set the world on fire with this thing, but because they're hard to kill, you can basically just be a pain. You bring like a unit of these, you just like fly around and throw dice at stuff and just be annoying. For 95 points, yeah, why not? It's more expensive, ironically, than the Enforcer one, but it's still pretty good. Like 4 dice with sustained attack. I mean, sure, you're not going to do a lot of damage, but it'll still be annoying. And if people are dedicating significant portions of their firepower to shoot at this thing once they've dropped their transport troops out, cool, awesome. I'm forcing you to do something that, like, you're forcing you to shoot me with stuff that could be shooting other things. So yeah, I quite like the Hornets. They're a bit expensive, but I quite like them, and they are required to make some of these other things work. I think the ability to move again really opens up like an interesting sort of set of options. You could like jump them in, you could move the Rangers into a different transport, or like you can fly these guys around and basically use them as battle buses. They're super quick and they're hard to kill because of fly. So yeah, pretty decent unit overall. Next up, Wolverines. Oh, I'll leave them open actually. Wolverines. What can I say about the Wolverines? I like the Wolverines and I don't. I like the Wolverines. They're relatively cheap for what they do. 30-inch range. So I was saying before, you know, this thing is going to outrange those tac drones, right? So they wouldn't care about tac drones. They just stay out of range and plink away at them, and they could do a lot of damage. They don't shoot amazingly, but they do have a 7-up save, 7-up armor, so they're hard to hurt, and they've got heavy armor, so you know, infantry isn't killing them unless they've got some form of AP. They're fine. They're pretty good tanks. The issue I have with them is that if we look at the Lancers, for example, right? And this is really a choice. They're the same cost. Yeah. So if you have an army list and you can bring 3 units of tanks, all right, the toss-up is direct between these two. They shoot slightly better. They have almost everything else is the same, right? Yeah. The Lancers are faster, and they have anti-grav. They're slightly better at shooting, and it has like better weapons, right? So the 30-inch range and penetrate shells, really good. AP2 is not to be sniffed at in this game. The frag shells, blast and pinning is pretty good. Like blast is a pretty decent roll, especially because it's not indirect, right? So you're not scattering, you're just rolling on your shoot skill, and these guys are shoot 5, right? So it's not terrible. The issue I have with them is these are more spammable. And what I mean by that is this rolls 2 dice per stand, you've got 3 stands, you've got 6 dice, right, on AP2. Cool. You get double the number of dice at the same range with these. You're losing 1 AP, but you're gaining pinning for this attack, which is really powerful in this game. And what I think you can do with these lancers, and I'll talk about it more in the army list in a bit, what you can do with these guys is you can basically use these as a spammable, like, medium heavy weapons platform, and just make them an absolute nightmare for people. Bringing, 4, 6, 4, 8, 12 dice, right? This unit fires 12 dice with AP1 and pinning. So you're ignoring heavy armor, which is not nothing, right? It's not so much about the saves, it's about a lot of things that are relatively impervious in this game to light weaponry suddenly loses that safety net. And at 30 inches, you're going to be shooting at a lot of different things. If you bring 3 or 4 units of these guys, you just are throwing buckets of dice with AP1 and pinning into Striders and, like, APCs, transports. Like, you have enough dice there to make a really, like, scary difference to people's games. So I really like the Lancers. The Wolverine has its place, don't get me wrong, and I'm not saying don't take it. I just think that if you are building an activation control sort of spam type list, I think the Lancer just works better. The Onager artillery vehicle. I really like this dude. Importantly, a thing to pay attention to is it doesn't have heavy armor. Right, so this thing is very killable. It has no save, it's armor 6 up, like you can shoot this with light infantry and win. Do not put this thing out in the open. It has indirect fire, right? You are putting this, hopefully, behind some sort of like hard cover, like an entire building, and you are just lobbing shots at stuff in probably buildings for the entire game. It's 85 points, it's nice and cheap. The weapon is really nice. So Chain Barrage is pretty cool. Chain Barrage, unlike normal blast templates where you drop one and then you drop one next to it and then you go around the outside, Chained Barrage is literally like a line of explosions, and you can actually reach, if you miss your target, you can then Chained Barrage back into them because you get quite a lot of distance off of it. Or you can use Chained Barrage to hit like quite a large group of like grouped up enemies, or you could use a Chained Barrage to hit 2 separate buildings. And if you hit a building with a blast marker, you just hit everything in that building once. So Chained Barrage is a very useful skill. For 85 points, I quite like this. Once you hit stuff with the blast template, you're hitting everything on 5s anyway, right? So it doesn't matter how good you are, everything is getting hit on 5s, and you're getting some pins, right? This is a really nice unit for 85 points. I would always bring one artillery piece, and this guy is pretty good for it, to be honest. Next support, we have the Hornet gunships. So this is the same guy we looked at earlier, only he loses his transport, which is his really big sort of selling point. The reason it's a big deal is this gun, right? So you've got 3 dice, so you're rolling 6 dice, AP1 and sustained attack. Okay, fine. So you're ignoring the heavy armor because of the AP1 and sustained attack. You're only rolling 6 dice, right? You are rolling less than 1/8 per shot, right? Because you're rolling 6 dice and you're talking about D8s. Sure, you might get lucky and roll 3 8s that roll into 3 8s or something and get a boatload of hits, but just get the transport one, right? This thing isn't really a murder weapon. It's not like the Enforcer's Interceptor, right? It's not got enough firepower to stand on its own 2 feet. I would probably just like suck up the extra 15 points, take the transport version, even if you're not using it. You never know when there's going to be a unit of Marines, which you should have loads of, just sitting around on the table that you need to get across the board to pick up an objective, and you just jump them in this thing and fly them across the board. This thing, you don't have that choice, and you're just not doing that much damage. I would probably be very tempted if I was playing against someone and they had these, just to ignore them completely, and hope that they just failed to kill stuff. Especially like if you're shooting at stuff in buildings, they don't shoot that well, right? Your odds are pretty bad in general. I would probably go with this dude rather than this one, given the choice. There's still a support slot, so you're not really gaining or losing anything from it. It's just a slightly less good version, and the real thing you're buying here is capacity. So I probably wouldn't go with these unless, you know, someone tells me I'm wrong, which they might do, but I genuinely think that's a pretty solid take on these guys. Okay, so that is all of the support options. Up next, we have 3 transports, which is a bit of a smorgasbord. I'm not a fan of expensive transports. So you've all got the same capacity, right? Which is what you're really paying for here. What you care about is capacity and speed, right? You care about the fact that you want to put dudes in there. You want them to get to wherever they're going to as quickly as possible and jump them out again. The bonus you're getting with these is the heavy armor, right? The mule is way quicker, right? I mean, it's much quicker. Generally speaking, I will hide my APCs behind a building or something, dash them out turn 1, and depending on what I'm doing, I'll either give them like a sprint order and get them as far as possible, so you're full 15 inches, and then hope, or, you know, use those 15 inches to get them behind something, because again, you want to, in this list, you really probably want to be going with activation control, so wait for them to move everything out that's going to try and shoot you, and then activate your transports, run them somewhere no one can see, and hope for the best. I think probably a much better option is give them an advance order, and because the boards aren't that big, right? You can go 10 inches and then drop off a troop unit and then go 5, right? Because they'll have an advance order as well. So you get the 15 inches, but this way you get to move your infantry out to somewhere relatively safe. Whereas if you sprint with a transport, you can't get the troops out. Or conversely, you have to get the troops out before you do the sprint order, which is not really what you want to do with them. So these guys, I think, are probably your best bet. They're dirt cheap. They get you 10 inches, which, combined with your average infantry move, is 15 inches. I would probably go with these, and then, similar to what I was saying about the Hornets, these just become harassing pieces. They're an extra couple of dice to throw at stuff, and if you do get into a position where you need to like bring a unit forward, and you've lost your Hornets if you bought them, jump them into these guys and just charge them forward and hope for the best. Like, I think that's probably the role they play. 60 points is pretty common as like a hangover, so there's nothing to say you shouldn't just bring one if you've got the 60 points left over and just be like, I might need to transport something. There might be an objective that flips nearby and I need to get everyone over there. It's not nothing. You can't bring these guys. The issue I have with these is that the weapons have been changed out on them and they just kind of suck. You just, like, yeah, you get more armor, but that's all you get, so you might as well just not bother. Just go with the 60 point cheaper ships version and hope for the best. Like, if the thing gets shot at, you're all dead. But I think if you're worried about getting shot at, probably just jump the infantry out and let them fend for themselves. Anyway, that's my take on the GCPS transports. And then you've got the 2 super heavies. Now, I was really down on the super heavies for the enforcers, but I actually quite like these guys. They're expensive. They're not quite expensive with the Enforcer Super Heavies, but they have some absolutely bonkers weaponry. So 36-inch range, right? This thing is reaching out and touching people. It's an AP2 blast pinning weapon that you can fire at different targets because of primary weapon. This thing is an absolute terror machine. It gives you an extra tactician. It can't be pinned. It doesn't lose lives when in combat. It's got resilience 3, so you're going to have to really grind it down, and it has capacity 6. This thing is cool. Oh, and it's got damage control, so it repairs itself. This thing is absolutely amazing. You have to put a lot of firepower in it to hurt it. It's armor 9, it's got 6 up save, and it's got resilience 3. This thing is unlikely to die unless you fire probably everything you've got or another super heavy into it. It gives you an extra tactician dice. I think there is, if you don't go for activation control, if you don't go for like spamming things, I think there's a very real list you build around at least to this super heavy, and just pinning everything your opponent has. I think it would be really effective at doing that. Yeah, I mean, shoots on 4s with a blast weapon. This thing is going to absolutely hammer people. I love it. It's cool. I haven't written a list with this, but I genuinely do quite like this as super heavy. And option 2 is the one you'll have seen if you've seen. There's a really early battle report with Ronnie on tabletop, I think. I might have gotten that wrong. But he has one of these, and it is pretty cool. I I don't love it quite as much as I do the Maul, purely because the Maul kind of provides like a big transport that you can kind of you can use it as a distraction Carnifex, because people are going to want to take that thing down. You can drop out a load of things out of the Maul, and they can be relatively safe because they're going to need to be shooting at the Maul rather than the infantry, and you can just use the infantry to just take over all the objectives in the middle of the board. The battle mech, obviously, like I said, doesn't have the transport capacity. What it does have, though, is it's tough, same as the other one. Armor 9 again, save 6 up. This thing is tough as hell. It doesn't shoot as well, but then it's because it's got a lot of direct fire weapons. So AP3 guns are brutal, 36-inch ranges. You're going to shoot whatever the hell you want, right? There isn't much in the game that's going to be more than 36 inches away from you, and you're probably going to make it to them on turn 2 at the latest, right? AP3, it's going to melt through almost any armor in the game. Vicious, so you have exploding 8s on wounds. It's your primary weapon, so you can pick different targets for this. And then you can pick the other ammo, so super frag shells, AP1 blast, pinning. Like, we've talked about this already. This is a brilliant weapon. Like, if you have a unit that you need to make sure shoots you terribly or CCs you terribly, if you pin 6 units, they're going to fail probably quite a lot of those on pinnings. And you can just basically roll across their armor pinning stuff. That's what the GCPS do a brilliant job of. You drag other people down to your level and beat them with experience. And this thing does it pretty well. Again, it's 300 points, or 400 points even. It's a lot of points, but my god, like, some of these weapons are absolutely brutal. And it's tough enough to take a beating. Like, a lot of people won't really be able to take this thing out. Or at least not with anything less than 3 turns of, like, concentrated shooting. This thing is a bit of a terror weapon. The problem is whenever you have big concentration points like this guy, losing him can basically cripple your game plan. And I think that's kind of why I prefer the Maul, because the Maul, that is still true of, right? There is no denying that losing this would absolutely cripple your game plan. The difference is that you're probably using this thing's capacity very early, whereas this is kind of your entire, like, anti-tank heavy weapon platform. If you're playing a game and you've spent 400 points on this thing, you're probably not bringing an awful lot of tanks, right? Because you've spent most of your, like, heavy weapons platform points already, in quotation marks. I think he's really good. I think if you build a list around him, he'd be great. I just slightly prefer them all. Anyway, there you go. That is the entire list. Very long-winded. It's an interesting list of options. The Major with his extra dice is like a really big deal, because you really need to use those. Because even if you get to the end of a turn and you've got some left, you can just spend them on unit strength for your units. You know, running a unit of veteran monocycles up into a contested objective and then spending 2 command tokens to push their unit strength over your opponent so that you now control it. Like, that's a really solid use of these guys. So yeah, I really like the GCPS as a list. And yeah, let's go over an army list I've written, and we can kind of talk over how I intend to use them and whether or not you maybe want to do the same thing. Okay, here we go. So this is my 2,000 point GCPS list. Exactly 2,000 points, which is very satisfying. It's made up of 2 companies. If I scroll down to the bottom here, you'll be able to see we've got 18 total units. Kind of going for a sort of overwhelming activation control. It's not the most activations you can get out of it, but it's also got quite a lot of punch to it. So it's a little bit of both, but it's very definitely on the high side. You'll out-activate units like Enforcers. I think you'd struggle to get more than 18 activations with Enforcers, even if you really try for it. Pretty good unit strength. There's a lot of, like, infantry type units in here, so they'll do well at holding objectives. And then you've got 2 black and 2 orange commandos, so that's what, 5 black, 2 orange every turn, as long as you keep your HQs alive. Very cool. Army nerve 6 up, so not great, not terrible. You're going to get out nerfed by, like, vermin in large numbers and the enforcers, but, you know, so is everybody else. Hold the line, so GCPS units that get +1 to their shoot value whilst within 3 inches of an objective. So basically it's incentivizing you to take your less good units, i.e. Marines, and set them on objectives. Battlefield stratagems, might as well go through these now quickly. So these are the things I've spent my leftover points on, so you can see I had 15 points left over. Quick thinking, basically your first turn, so the very first initiative roll of the game, you get +2 to your results. It's basically just a I win first turn like type button. It doesn't always work out that way, especially if your opponent takes it as well, and for 5 points. Most people will, but it's kind of like losing that first turn can be a bit painful, especially if you're hoping to kind of fly in and deploy an important unit. So quick thinking is just useful for 5 points. You're not going to find a better use of 5 points, I don't think. And covert intel, this is basically just a chance to win a free victory point. It doesn't always work out, but it's quite nice when it does. And for the 10 points that you probably have left over anyway, like if you have those points left over, this is where I would start spending my points. Strategic orders. All right. So these are the GCPS specific ones. So you have generic ones, which are in the rulebook, which are things like spending a command token to reroll any 2 dice. These are the specific ones to GCPS. That's hard to say. So first one is Blaze Away. Any unit with laser rifles. So that's things like Marines, veterans. Some of the other like Marine type units have them. This is basically just another way to make Marines slightly better. So if you give them, basically it's incentivizing you to take your Marines, run them onto an objective, give them an Overwatch token every turn, and just like slaughter anything coming towards them. What it does is it halves your weapons range. So your range will go to 6 inches for laser rifles, and you get +1 dice. So they're 1 die normally. By doing this, you go from 12 inches to 6, and you gain an extra die. So you're rolling 12 dice for a normal Marine unit. And if you're on an objective, you got +1 to shoot and +1 dice, which makes a big difference. So yeah, use this on your Marines, basically. Move it, soldier. So this is the order I was talking about before. After an infantry unit resolves a shooting attack in the combat phase, you can then spend a command token and you can move that unit its advanced distance again. So, why is that important? I mean, anyone who's played Tau knows that jump, shoot, jump is or old Tau have been able to jump, shoot, jump for a while, but the ability to move your guys into position, take a shot, and then move back out again is very powerful. It's less useful on things like Marines, but Marines can do it, but they have to be in command radius. Veteran and Ranger units do not. So if you have Veteran infantry or Ranger infantry, you can move them 5 or 6 inches, depending on the move, fire a shot, and then move them again. I haven't checked, but it's potential you could move them out and then move them back into an APC. Which you might want to check on it, but there's a lot of ways you can play this. Not least of all, you can move 5 inches, take a shot, move into a building or behind a building. And if you are using activation control well enough, you can probably game it so that you position these guys so that no one can see them other than the unit you want to shoot at. Run over, shoot at them, run behind cover, and keep them completely hidden from everyone. This is a very powerful skill. I think if you perfect the use of the GCPS, you are doing it partially by solving how this works and how to do it well. Bottom one here, maximize profits, another really powerful one. So this is basically if you have a unit contesting an objective, you can spend command tokens to increase the unit strength of that objective on that objective until you win it. So you can spend a command spend a command token and get +2 unit strength to that unit. So if you've got a monocycle unit, which is probably the one this is going to end up being used on, the monocycles, when they're at low strength, only have 2 unit strength. If an enemy infantry squad is on an objective with them, that enemy unit is going to be winning that. You spend a single command token, that goes up to 4 unit strength. You're probably at least tying at that point. So this is a very, very useful expense of command tokens, and that's why I've prioritized getting more. This should net you a significant number of tokens, and when you're not using them on these things at the end of the turn, you can just throw it into this. They get wasted if you don't, so why not? Very cool set of orders. I really like it. Oh, and the thing I didn't mention is Move It Soldier. Rangers and veterans can do it outside of command, which is cool. It's kind of like a light version of what the enforcers get. So that's the special rules and the stratagems. Let's take a look at the list and how it's supposed to work. So like I said, we've got 2 companies, both commanded by majors, which is where we're getting those extra tactician dice. We've got 2 marine units. Again, like I said, these guys are intended to find an objective and sit on it the whole game. They're not threatening in any way, shape, or form. All they're really looking to do is set an objective, take pot shots at stuff, and basically be annoying. If you can get them in a building within 3 inches of an objective, that makes them particularly offensive. They're not going to win a lot of long-range fights, but I think it will make people think twice about charging them. You basically give them an Overwatch order every turn, and if someone tries to charge them, they're going to eat a hell of a lot of actually relatively effective fire. So yeah, the Marines are, for their points, really good. Veteran monocycles, these guys, like I said before, are great. They're particularly good at like snatching objectives, especially with the ability to spend command tokens to get unit strength on them. So, you know, they're not super tough. They're not going to hang around for a long time, but you know, those first couple of turns, they're probably going to be indispensable, or keep them hidden for the first couple of turns and then rock them out later when like most of the really big heavy hitting weapons have gone and they're more likely to survive. Yeah, I think there's another unit. Yeah, there's another unit in the second company. These guys are great for troops. I'd always consider bringing a couple of these guys. Heavy weapons teams, this is exactly what I said earlier on. We're bringing these guys mostly for the anti-aircraft. They're relatively cheap for an unlocking unit, and the AP2 makes them good. Range 24 is very sad. However, you know, what they're really there to do is they're to deny aircraft, and one on each flank will cover enough of the board that you will have coverage. If they want to cut you out, they can. These guys are not like super survivable, but they're enough of a threat that people are going to have to try and divert power to either deal with them or just hide from you. So very cool unit for relatively cheap. The GCPS Strider, we've talked these things to death. They're great. They're not going to win you games, but they will force your opponent to do stuff they don't want to do, especially in the GCPS, where you can maybe hold these guys till later on in the turn and force your opponent to move into a position where you can get into range of their heavier vehicles or tanks, or some of their armor that has heavy armor. So yeah, they're not amazing, but for 120 points, they're good. We've got first unit of Lancers. Again, you could swap these guys out for Wolverines, and I'm not going to say that you shouldn't. I just think that they fit my playstyle better, and I prefer the models, if I'm entirely honest. I think the Lancers just look better than the Wolverines, and they come in the core box, so you know, extra bonuses. I just love the fact they throw all these dice. So the idea, I think, with these Lancers, I've got more in the other company. I think I want to run these as long as my opponent doesn't have very scary blast weaponry, is basically run these things as a big blob and focus down individual targets with all the dice. And even if you don't win, you know, you're still AP1 and pinning. You're going to do some damage and pin them, which is not nothing. The Onager, like I said, Onager is really good. All it wants to do is just lob templates, and that's what it's going to do all game. Hide it behind something, throw templates, no notes. Onto the second company. So the first company is very no frills. It basically just unlocks some stuff for you and brings the Lancer and the Onager. Second company, Major, Marines again, Veteran monocycles again. All things still apply. The monocycles are great. I might, depending on what my opponent is doing, it's probably worth considering having one go out turn 1-2, take objectives, die probably, and then 3-4 these guys come out and replace them and do the same. It gives you like really consistent ability to like snatch open objectives if you put them into the midboard. The Ranger Tank Hunters, like I mentioned when I was talking about them during the breakdown, Ranger Tank Hunters in Hornets is like a really good combination. You fly them in, blow up something that's particularly scary, and then you run them behind cover and maybe keep doing it in the midboard. You probably bring the Hornets back out and use them as a transport unit for other things. You can fly them away and then maybe transport a unit of Marines onto an objective that's somewhere else, and just be a general pain in the ass. So yeah, I'm a relatively large fan of these guys despite their cost, because I think if used properly they can be a real scalpel unit. So keep an eye on these guys. If someone brings Tank Hunters in a transport, be wary, because they could do a lot of damage if you get them in the right place. Like I said, other heavy weapons team is exactly the same. These guys are area denial for aircraft, and they do a relatively good job of it. So why the hell not? The Strider, we've been over it. I'm not going to hash that one over again. And we've got 2 more units of Lancers. So in total, you've got 9 Lancers rolling 4 dice apiece at 30 inches. You don't have an awful lot of AP2, AP3. So, you know, feel free to swap out maybe the other unit for a unit of Wolverines, but I'm yet to try this, but I think these guys will genuinely be brilliant at harassing enemy armor. even if you don't kill them off outright, you'll pin them, you'll do enough wounds that they become basically combat ineffective. I think they work pretty well. And then obviously the last unit here is that transport unit for the tank hunters. So you'll have a load of orders, a load of activations, so you can force your opponent to move things. The particular winners from the activation control are the Striders. So, you know, if they push their tanks forwards, you can use your Striders to kind of counter. And depending on whether or not you put them on opposite flanks or the same flank, you can force your opponent to move their armor into a range where you can come out and fire some of those AP2 shots at them, because they're one of your only really effective access to AP2. And when you couple it up with the heavy weapons teams, you actually end up with quite a lot of coverage for preventing your opponent from pushing into you. The GCPS are relatively defensive, which is why you kind of want the Hornets to push up and force engagements for you a bit. But you will hold objectives incredibly well as the GCPS, and this list kind of forces your opponent to show their hand each turn. The hard part is maintaining that. You know, nothing in here is particularly tough, and you're probably going to start losing the attrition war relatively quickly because, unless you're playing against the Plague, for example, armies like the Enforcers or maybe even the Vermin are going to out-attrit you. However, armies like the Forge Fathers are going to come nowhere near you. So you really can just be like, well, okay, you've run out of activations, I get to do whatever the hell I want now, and you will then be able to gang up on their units and basically just focus down individuals. It's worth taking note of the strategic thing here, which is there are times when it is best to ignore an opponent's units if you can remove orders elsewhere. What I mean by that is that these guys, they don't have really, really high AP weapons other than the tank hunters. So there is an argument to be made if your opponent has a very high-powered, very tough unit like a super heavy, maybe don't wipe it out. Kill all their infantry so they can't hold objectives. Like, focus on what you can kill well and do a lot of that. And when your opponent only has a super heavy running around capturing one objective a turn, he cannot win, and you can. And I think, again, a lot of what makes a good GCPS list, I think, probably leans into that weakness rather than trying to patch the hole, because you can't. You very quickly run out of points when you try and push too hard into AP with the GCPS, so it's best to just avoid it and realize that you're just going to lose some people some of the time, and allow them to have their super heavy that storms around the battlefield, and you just hold your hands up and say, fine, have it. I think the only way you counter that is by bringing super heavies of your own and using them as kind of dedicated super heavy killers. But I think this list probably has legs. I think you'll really struggle with super heavies, and the way to get around that is to basically remove everything that's not that super heavy and go really hard into just killing every other unit. Anyway, that's GCPS for you. I think it's a really interesting list. I think there's a lot of choices here, and while I was waxing lyrical about its ability to control activation, I think you can build multiple different archetypes with this list, and I'm really excited to get into playing more of them. I've got a game with this list in a couple of days' time, so maybe I'll report back on how that goes, and I'll change all of this. But for now, I think it's an effective list. Whether or not it's, you know, a meta-changing tournament-type winning list, only time can tell. But for now, that's kind of my thoughts on the GCPS and the thoughts on how you can build an effective GCPS list. I hope you guys have enjoyed, and I will hopefully catch you again on the next one. Have a good one, guys. Bye.